So hi everyone and welcome to my new video about Froobit framework. In the meantime, Froobit is released on npm, so there is an npm package which you can install and start using Froobit framework to make your games. And this is the npm repository. Here is a little example, just a basic hello world in Froobit. And also you can see that the installation is done by using Froobit CLI, and Froobit CLI will practically create your game. You can just type fru in it, and you just say the name of the directory in which you want your game to be initialized. And after it's finished, you can just cd into that directory and run npm run dev, and it will run your game on localhost 4000 like it's in my case here. And I've been adding some new features, and I didn't upload as often as I probably should. I'm not giving up on this framework. I think this is really a great and easy to use framework. I'm trying to make API for developers really simplified, and what I've been working on the past couple of weeks, I've been adding a lot of new features. For example, I added layers, canvas layering support. So what you currently see on this in this example is that I have some kind of light source. It looks like light source, and when the character is moved inside and outside of the light source, you can notice the change in color. And you can also see that we have this beautiful, nice parallax effect in the background, so everything is moving at different speed, and I will show you how it's made in just a second. I can show you the parallax. So if we go to background controller, you can see that actually parallax is done by calling parallax utility from the framework. So you import parallax and you say from, and then you just say the name of your assets. And in my case, those are the backgrounds that I included. Let's go up here. I'll show you the background. So we have separate images. So the background number one, the one in the background. So the last one is this background, and then we have first layer of mountains, then second layer, and we have first layer of trees, second layer of trees, and this ground element. Let me close this, you basically let me go to the main file. So the main file is our entry point, and this line initializes the framework. It accepts controllers array and options object, and you can see that in controllers array I have registered background controller first, and here I define assets. So you're using imports to import your assets. You can see that I imported background 1 to background 5 here, and then I just listed them here. So I used shorthand notation, and this is why this framework is easy and very simple when you look at the code. Is because JavaScript ES6 standard allows you to write something like this. It's so you don't have to be redundant like that and so on. And I really try to make use of those features of ES6, and framework allows you to write ES6 code, and as well, you can see that now as soon as I save here, the framework reloads the scene, so you basically have a live reloading, and it's a nifty feature. And we have initialized our assets here, so actually loaded our assets, and now we have just reference them by the name here. We gave them to Parallax utility, and I will explain this later, but basically you can create something that is just a small piece of functionality which wraps your controller for your renderable objects, and this is such case in which we're just subscribing to different events. So move right, we want to have a speed x positive speed. So yeah, if we move right, then we have x positive. If we go left, we have x negative speed. If epsilon speed is 0, and if we stop, we just set the 0 to 0, 0. And the velocity and all this kind of stuff, which you see, the set state thing and all that, it has to do with how a parallax utility process those backgrounds in under the hood. But for now, you can practically reuse this code and basically add more logic to this, and it's that simple. The second thing that I worked on was platform editor. So if you go to main entry point file and you add option editor true, you will see that you can actually click and drag and create platforms. So those will be so now I actually have a mouse click handler bind to two different things, to editor and to rock creation, but it doesn't really matter. So and if you click N, you are N, a key on the keyboard, you're creating a new type of platform. And basically what you can do later, you can basically draw textures over these rectangles here. And if I click save, so I click S on the keyboard, I have just saved a JSON configuration for what I've just drawn, and you can see that here is a JSON declaration, actual definition of our platforms, and you see that the type is 0 here and the type is 1 here, and I will probably dedicate a full video on platform editor. But for now, this is just a quick intro. So yeah, and this example actually uses platform editor. So the ground, let me check. Ground controller actually uses platform loader utility from framework, and the config is that JSON file which you just saw, and it loads the platforms, and then when P5 setup is done, you render those platforms. You just call render method, and yeah, it's so this is runtime rendering, and you can basically do it whenever you want. You can in the middle of the game, you just call render and you give it a renderable object. In this case, this is a platform, and it will be drawn on the canvas. So if I press backspace, I will delete all those platforms, but I will refresh the page now. And the next thing that I want to show you is probably the most interesting one, and this is canvas layering. So if I go here and if I call through create dummy. So I just created a dummy entity and dummy controller. So let me go to controller, so you can see that we have dummy controller here, and we have a dummy entity here. So well, basically each entity has a layer method which you can override, and then you can return whatever layer you want. And I will show you how it's done in this example and why we need layers. So let's just leave this example for a bit, and let's go to layers.js. So basically you can create a file called layers or whatever, and you can use config utility from Froobit framework to load layer configuration, and you do that by just calling config layers, and you pass your configuration object. And what you really do here is you specify the name of the layer, and then you give it a function which basically configures that layer. And you don't have to do that. So for example, we can just say here that player is actually null, so it doesn't have any configuration. And if you watched carefully previously, you have noticed that the color of the character has been amplified. It was brighter while he was in this area of white light, if I can say. And now it's not the case. It looks like the light is somehow covering this. It's over the character. It's not illuminating the character. So let me show you. So if we want to configure our layer, so the layer we are configuring is called player, but it should have been. I should give it another name, but. If we go to character, you will see that up here, so this is our entity for the character. We have layer method, and we have return layers player, and we call this as a function. So yeah, this is how it's done, and for light as well. So we just returned player layer for here. And if you go to Elements tab in your Chrome developer tools, you will see that there is actually a canvas dedicated to this layer. So this is the feature that I'm talking about. Actually, Froobit is creating a new canvas, which you can't see actually, but it is using that canvas to draw your layer stuff, and then it merged that canvas into your main default Froobit default canvas. And yeah, so, and it's basically hidden and you can't see it. But yeah, once you have a layer separated into a different canvas, you can do a lot of things, and I will show you that right now. So let's just let's define a function. So arrow function. Which will enable, for example, we can convert this layer into a grayscale. So grayscale, and the pattern that I'm using here is pretty much the same pattern that I'm using for adding physics to entities. So you have a method. In this case, you have a function, but in here you have a method which accepts the object. And this object has a lot of functions which you can use to modify behavior. And the same is here. So you can use grayscale, brightness. This is actually maps one-to-one to canvas filter option. So if we go here and search for canvas filters, yeah, you will see that rendering context has this filter property, and you have all sorts of filters here, like blur, brightness, contrast, blah blah blah, saturate, sepia, and all sorts of filters. And most of those filters are supported within the Froobit. So you can call grayscale, and then you supply a number between 0 and 100. So if I say 100, you will see that everything will stay the same. Only the character and the light will be grayscale. So yeah, now our character is now grayscale. And just to show you more, you can use light, and the light is actually, so let's comment out grayscale and let's just call light, and you will see that now, just a second, we need to refresh this again. Okay, so now you can see that light actually illuminates our character. It's not over the character, it's illuminating it, because for this layer, blend mode is actually applied. So if you don't know what blend mode is, you can go to p5.js documentation, search for blending, and let me quickly find this on the p5 reference. So blend mode, yeah. So blend mode is actually describes how how it will how canvas will or when you have overlapping graphics, how it will show it. So you have different blend modes, and you can experiment with those. You currently I think I did not added support for all of these. So currently you can use light, which is basically I think yeah, overlay, blend mode overlay by default, but you will be able to use all of these. And this is this is for the layer configuration for the layer, and also why the layering is important. Well, if we go to character, and if I remove if I comment this out, and if I go to light also and comment this out, basically every entity in our game will be in the same layer with the background, together with the background. So it still creates the player canvas layer here, you can see, but it does not use it for rendering. It actually renders everything on the main canvas. And what actually happens is so since we don't have this layer anymore, we can just say here null, and when we want to change configuration for default canvas layer, we can supply a function here. So first you supply your layers configuration here, and then you supply a function for your default canvas configuration, and it's same as before. So you can use light as before, and you can just call light, and you will see that now each image in the main canvas is using blend mode overlay, as I said previously. So you can see that we have this strange behavior because it affects the whole canvas, and that's why we have used layers previously like this, because you're separating things. Basically you can define it on entity level. So I have defined this on an entity level. So just to demonstrate this once more, let's go to dummy and let's draw an ellipse, and it will follow the mouse. So p mouse x, p mouse epsilon, and let's say 300 by 300, and let's fill it with red. 255, 250, oh sorry, 0, 0. Yeah, so now we have we should have red circle following our mouse, but first we have to register our dummy controller so that we can see it in the game. And now I should see it. Yeah, so you can see a red circle, and it is basically, you can see that it is behind our character. And let me just come here and let me give it an alpha of like 50. So let's see what happens. Yeah, it's transparent now, and yeah, but it's still behind our character. And what we can do now is we can override layer method, return, sorry, I forgot how to type, return layers and player. So it will be in the same layer together with our player. So let's see what happens now. we have an error. Yeah, I know why. Because we need to call, because player is actually a function. It's not a. Okay, so we should see this. And what happens now is, yeah. The problem here is, and it's great that this happened because yeah, I can actually explain why this happened. So because we are using a separate canvas for layering, it actually tries to find the position on that canvas. So the P here that you see in the render method isn't your default canvas. It's actually giving you a graphics object from the other one. And how we can fix this, we can go to dummy controller, and we can always access P5 main canvas here. I mean main graphics object from here, and we can use let me see, with controller from, oh sorry, import, we have to import from the framework, so import with controller from Froobit, and before render also. So what it actually does is we will add a small simple controller which will run before our entity render method runs. So that's what we're gonna do. So let's create dummy item here, and we return with controller. We say which item, dummy, and we say before render, and here it accepts a callback, and we can say dummy position is actually P5 mouse X. Sorry, so let's P5 create vector P5 mouse X, P5 mouse epsilon. So now this will run each time before dummy render method is run, and we will have this position set. So let me go here. We can initialize this position to be create vector. So this is 0 0 by default, and then we can say this position X, and this position epsilon. So if you haven't understand why P here is not the classic P from the instance mode of P5.js, and now you can see that it follows the mouse, and also you can see that when I hover over the character, it becomes red actually. So yeah, it amplifies the red part of the character colors. And what we can do, we can go to layers. Let me check. Yeah, so our player is now using a light filter, but we can also use grayscale, and let's see what happens. So you can see that both our circle and the light and the player are in the same layer, and the grayscale filter is applied. But if we choose to make a circle layer, for example, sorry, no, so it doesn't have a function for the configuration, and we just go here and we call circle, and we wait. You see again that we have our circle, but this time it's not affected. It is not affected by this filter, and we can apply another filter. So we can say, for example, sorry, happened? Yeah, I switched to full screen mode, sorry. So yeah, I can now configure our circle layer, and here we can say, for example, brightness, and we say brightness to, I don't know, 20. So our circle is now much darker. And one thing to notice here is that the more filters you add, the more, so you can also see that now we have layer circle canvas here as well. And the more you add, the more layers you add, the more filters you add, the slower your game will be. So the FPS will drop. So it's currently it's oscillating. It's mostly around 60 FPS, but it sometimes it drops. And yeah, you should take care of that. If you have a lot of layers, you don't want to have a lot of filters and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so you can download Froobit from npm. You can play around with it. I hope you learned something new from this video. Actually, Froobit version 1.03 does not have this functionality yet. I will try to release new version as soon as possible, as soon as I finish this functionality. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.